The Twin Cities area is made up of the following building assemblages: the suburban home, traditional single-family home, 3 to 4 story apartments, and the rapidly emerging 6 to 7 story apartments. Currently, these property dynamics facilitate a hegemonic power system consisting of banks, developers, owners, and renters. Building design is heavily influenced by legal documents such as leases, loans, and mortgages. These contracts create particular spatial systems that maximize capital rather than facilitate an interpersonal value system.
The intervention, the vis-à-vis agreement, reconditions property terms. The vis-à-vis is rooted in key values of interpersonal relations, light ownership, stewardship, and right to roam. These core values are materialized by targeting different aspects of each assemblage, creating new city units. These units aspire to move toward a culture of collectivism, active mobility, by changing static space to convertible space, finance based on manufactured demand to demands of interest, and individual risk to interpersonal responsibility.
The agreement is the first step of property buyback processes that lead to spatial transformations and a future rooted in environmental stewardship and mutual rights. The new single-family house assemblage is created by regrouping properties into larger groups of light ownership. Collectively, individuals buy back ground rights to create a new property dynamic that separates building ownership from land ownership. The new financial agreement transfers ownership of land through the tenant to the small public. The tenant takes on light ownership and co-stewardship responsibilities of the land and the building. The tenant is obliged to pass the vis-à-vis to the next tenant. Over time, mortgage agreements with the bank are severed. However, now the landlord and tenant both gain limited equity. As a result of collective buybacks and regrouping, the traditional assemblage over time could change the layout of the land dramatically. Collective sizes over time could calibrate to be walkable sizes. Businesses could take advantage of new property regroupings by creating economic courtyards at the intersections of new property edges. Collectives could decide to create new shared interior spaces or even recondition the streets to stem and redirect traffic flows. New building types would emerge to adapt to local stewardship protocols. By regrouping properties, the built environment moves to reflect the local collective's shared interests.
By removing the emphasis on individual properties based in the single-family unit, the scale of the collectives becomes more conducive to a walkable environment. Light ownership will spur demands of interest interpersonally, but also intercollectively, which would move toward a system of shared equity and diffused power. This collective spatial autonomy creates a local identity defined by immediate community rather than distant capital. New builds would be motivated by direct community needs that do not rely on a car-directed infrastructure.
The next assemblage of intervention targets the rapidly emerging 6 to 7 story apartments. By removing non-convertibility clauses from leases, floor right buybacks can occur to create a network of internally managed collectives. Instead of a rental situation, the vis-à-vis grants floor rights and limited ground rights to tenants. In exchange for the rights, the developer can choose to still charge rent for maintenance or enter a stewardship agreement with the tenants. Over time, mortgage payments are paid off to mutual benefit. Once the floor rights are acquired, the small public has power to decide whether or not to enter future agreements for new developments. The goal of the floor right lease is to create flexible grounds for diverse programmatic uses. In this situation, buyback occurs at the unit of the apartment room. The vis-à-vis unifies the network of apartment assemblages. The tenant can take the vis-à-vis to any building within the network. Over time, new growth can occur internally within each building, and development could take advantage of interstitial space in between structures. The network of new convertible buildings would serve the greater community by creating a more flexible urban metabolism.
The floor buyback, directed by the vis-à-vis agreement, will create a new scale of social conscious and dispersed ownership where it didn't exist before. this time at the building scale. This allows renters to pool demands toward initiatives and builds that can attribute to their communal desires and well-being. By engaging responsibilities and ownership at the floor scale, convertibility and room usage is directed, in addition to a heightened interaction with adjacent collectives.
The final assemblage of intervention is the suburb. Here the collective buyback occurs primarily through the subdividing of individual yards and placing ecological and free roam easements on the yards. Financially, the homeowner would transfer a portion of their property to the small public via homeowners association. The homeowner would still maintain ownership of their home, however, new easements would be placed and managed on behalf of collective and ecological interests. Over time, the land would move toward a more continuous ecology stewarded by homeowners. The buyback, in this situation, occurs at the scale of the yard. Yards are subdivided into portions dedicated for ecological and free roam purposes. Easements for free roaming and ecological growth would be placed on the land. Collectives could consolidate these easements for the purpose of providing necessary space for regenerative native habitats. Space for larger groves of trees and wetlands would serve to drive a regenerative development model for suburbs. Wildlife environments would not be atomized as they were in the previous development model, and free roam access to the land would create new clusters of settlement to foster more sociable and walkable space.
Pooling of yards via buyback through the vis-à-vis agreement gives way to a spatial continuity and autonomy for homeowners. Though instead of being designated physically to a singular yard, homeowners can develop a shared spatial language that is directed by the collective. Not only are new builds directed by the collective, but existing natural ecologies are given the space to roam and grow back more continually as well. In considering how the vis-à-vis may influence new development of land in rural suburb areas, the agreement structure would direct collectives to be shaped around the existing landscape and natural environment. Homeowners agree to becoming stewards of land that share the responsibility of care and nourishment for the environment they live. Rather than land being used solely for farming or solely for housing, new collectives can combine aspects of both to create a more local, physicalized cultural landscape. The goal is to design through these basic urban units via a light ownership agreement structure, rather than master planning or crafting policies. Intervening on them has the potential to create a metropolitan scale transformation, spatially, socially, and ecologically. This document becomes a driver for regrouping, bundling, and converting space and property based on collective interest.